I was standing barefoot on the cold tile when they told me I had 10 minutes to leave. 10 minutes. That was the number he said, like he was telling me the weather. Calm, almost polite, as if he was asking me to move my car, not asking me to leave the house I had lived in for 15 years. I remember looking down at my feet first. That detail stayed with me. One sock missing. I didn't even remember taking it off. The other one was thin and gray, worn at the heel. I could feel the chill coming up through the floor. And I kept thinking, I should put on shoes. I should put on shoes before we talk about this. But no one was talking. My brother stood by the front door with his arms crossed. My sister-in-law was behind him, holding a folder against her chest like a shield. My nephew was somewhere upstairs. I could hear his music through the vents. He was laughing at something on his phone. He didn't know yet. Or maybe he did, and no one thought it mattered enough to tell him. You can't do this, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded thin, like it had already decided not to fight too hard. My brother sighed. That sigh hurt more than anything else. It was the sigh of someone tired of explaining something obvious to a difficult person. We can, he said. And we are. The paperwork is done. I asked him what paperwork. He looked at the folder in his wife's hands. She didn't look at me. She stared at the wall behind my head, like I wasn't really there. That house isn't in your name anymore, she said. We went over this. No, we didn't. Not like this. Not ever like this. I took a step forward and felt the cold again. It traveled up my legs, straight to my chest. This is my house, I said. I paid for it. My brother shook his head slowly, like he was dealing with a child. You lived here. That's not the same thing. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked, quietly, like ice under a boot. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the folder, tear it open, scatter papers across the floor. Instead, I stood there, barefoot, with one sock, and tried to breathe. They didn't raise their voices. That's what made it worse. There was no fight, no chaos, just calm certainty. Just two people who had already decided I was done. You can stay with a friend, my sister-in-law said. Or a hotel. Just not here. I asked them where they expected me to go at night. They exchanged a look, quick and practiced. That's not our responsibility, my brother said. I felt something heavy settle in my stomach. A mix of disbelief and shame. Shame, because some small part of me wondered if I had really missed something. If I had somehow let this happen. I walked into the living room. They followed me with their eyes, but didn't stop me. The couch was the same one I'd bought years ago. The coffee table had a ring from a mug I spilled when my mother was still alive. The photo frames were gone. I noticed that right away. Empty spaces on the wall where memories used to be. They took the pictures. I said out loud, not really to them. My sister-in-law's voice came from the hallway. Those are ours. I laughed then. A short, sharp sound that surprised even me. I went to the bedroom. My bedroom. The closet door was open. Half my clothes were gone. The good ones. The winter coat my father bought me before he died. The suitcase was missing. I felt dizzy. The room tilted just slightly, like the house itself was tired of holding me up. You packed my things. I said. We packed what we thought you'd want, my brother replied. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my hands into the mattress. It was still warm from sleep. Their sleep. I realized I hadn't slept there the night before. I had worked late. I had trusted that when I came home, it would still be my home. How long have you been planning this? I asked. No answer at first. Then my sister-in-law said, long enough. That was all she gave me. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, like they didn't fully belong to me anymore. I grabbed the old backpack from the corner, the one I used for groceries. It still smelled like detergent and oranges. I put in my wallet, my phone charger, a photo I found tucked inside a book. It was me and my parents, sitting on the porch that no longer belonged to me. I didn't look at it for long. I didn't trust myself to. When I walked back into the hallway, my brother had opened the door. Cold air rushed in. It carried the smell of rain and car exhaust. You really need to go, he said. I stopped in front of him. I looked at his face. The same face I grew up with. The same eyes that once looked at me for approval when we were kids. You're doing this, I said. You're really doing this. He didn't answer. He just stepped aside. I stepped out onto the porch. The wood creaked under my bare feet. That sound felt like a goodbye. The door closed behind me. Locked. I heard the click. Clean. Final. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, like it might open again if I waited long enough. It didn't. I walked down the steps. The concrete was even colder. I sat on the curb and put my head in my hands. People passed by. Cars drove past. No one stopped. I don't blame them. I didn't look like an emergency. I looked like someone who had lost an argument. My phone buzzed. A message from my sister-in-law. You forgot your keys. You won't need them. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but the list in my head was short. I had been the one people leaned on. The one with the house, the extra room, the stability. I had nowhere to go. I slept in my car that night. I parked 2 streets over, where the lights were dimmer. I folded my jacket into a pillow. I didn't cry. I was too numb for that. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up with a start. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then it all came back at once. The door, the lock, the way my brother wouldn't look at me. I sat up and stared through the windshield at the dark shape of the house in the distance. My house, their house. I didn't know what to call it anymore. Something felt wrong. Not just emotionally, logically. I replayed everything in my head. The folder, the calm, the confidence. The way they said the paperwork was done. I had signed papers before. Years ago, after my mother died. I remembered being tired, grieving, trusting. A cold realization started to form, slow and heavy. They hadn't just kicked me out, they had planned this. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when it started. But I knew one thing for sure. They were counting on me to walk away quietly. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and let out a long breath. My hands were shaking, now, not from fear, from something else. Something steady and sharp. I wasn't done, not even close. I didn't go far the next morning. I watched the house from my car as the sun came up. The light hit the windows the same way it always had. Soft, yellow at first, then brighter. Like nothing had changed. Like the night before hadn't happened. My brother came out around 7. He was dressed for work. Clean shirt, coffee mug in hand. He locked the door behind him and walked to his car without looking around. He didn't see me sitting 2 streets over. Or maybe he did and chose not to. When he drove away, I finally started the engine. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't sit there anymore. I went to work. That part still feels strange to say. Like it doesn't fit. But I went anyway. I parked in my usual spot. I walked inside. I smiled at the receptionist. I answered emails. I sat through a meeting about numbers that didn't matter to me at all. No one knew I didn't have a home. I didn't tell them. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real, in a way, I wasn't prepared for. Around noon, my manager asked if I was okay. He said I looked tired. I said I hadn't slept well. That was true. I spent my lunch break in my car, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of the house when it was empty, when it was just walls and dust and potential. Pictures of me painting the living room alone, music playing, the loud windows open. Pictures of my mother sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, telling me she liked the light in there. That house didn't just happen. It wasn't handed to me. After work, I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind with thin walls and buzzing lights. I paid for tonight's cash. I didn't want my card statements to tell the story before I was ready. The room smelled like cleaner and something older underneath. I didn't unpack because I barely had anything to unpack. I sat on the bed and finally let myself cry. Not loudly, just quiet tears that soaked into the collar of my shirt. I cried for my parents, for the years I spent holding everything together, for the way trust can disappear without warning. And slowly, underneath the sadness, something else started to surface. Anger, not the loud kind, the steady kind, the kind that asks questions. I replayed my life with them, not just the night before, all of it. When my father died, I was 32. My brother was already married. My sister-in-law was pregnant. They were renting a small apartment. Money was tight. Stress was high. My mother couldn't handle the house alone. She never said it directly, but I could see it. The stairs were too much. The yard was too much. The silence was too much. So I moved back in. I told myself it was temporary, just until things settled. But life doesn't always settle the way you expect. I paid the bills, all of them, utilities, repairs, groceries. My brother helped when he could, but it was never steady. He had his own family. his own responsibilities. When my mother got sick, I took time off work. I drove her to appointments. I learned which pills went with which meals. I slept on the couch so I could hear her if she called out at night. After she passed, the house felt too big and too empty. My brother suggested moving in, just for a while, to help with his family, to keep the house from feeling so quiet. It'll be good for all of us, he said, and I believed him. We talked about ownership back then, about the house, about the will. I remembered that conversation clearly. Or at least, I thought I did. My mother had wanted things to be simple. The house was supposed to be mine. That was what she told me. That was what she told others. I had been there. I had given up my apartment. I had put my life on hold. But there were papers. Always papers. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table with a pen in my hand. My brother beside me. A lawyer on speakerphone. My head heavy with grief. My mind foggy. Just sign, my brother had said. This is just to make things easier. Easier. That word echoed now, bitter and sharp. Over the years, I kept paying. I fixed the roof. I replaced the water heater. I refinished the floors myself, one plank at a time. After work and on weekends, my brother and his wife saved money. They took vacations. They upgraded their cars. I didn't mind. Or I told myself I didn't. Family helps family. That was the rule I lived by. Slowly, things shifted. They stopped asking. They started assuming. My sister-in-law rearranged the kitchen without asking me. She threw out dishes she didn't like. She replaced the couch cushions. She referred to the house as ours when talking to friends. I noticed. But I didn't push back. I didn't want conflict. I didn't want to be the difficult one. When my nephew was born, I gave up my room so they could have more space. I moved into the smaller bedroom. Then eventually into the converted office. It's temporary, they said. Everything was always temporary, until it was end single quotes T.T the motel. I opened my laptop and started digging. Bank records, emails, old scanned documents. Anything I had saved. It took hours. My eyes burned. My head ached. But piece by piece, a pattern started to emerge. There were signatures I didn't recognize. Transfers I didn't remember approving. Dates that didn't line up with what I remembered. My stomach tightened. I wasn't stupid. I handled finances at work. I knew how things were supposed to look. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. The next day, I took time off work and went to the county records office. Walking in there felt strange. Like I was stepping into a version of my life I didn't know existed. Rows of desks. Quiet voices. Paper everywhere. I asked for property records. I gave the address. The woman behind the counter typed slowly, clicked, scrolled. Then she looked up at me. Are you related to the current owners? She asked. Owners, plural. My chest tightened. Yes, I said. I think so. She printed out the documents and slid them across the counter. I stared at the names, my brother's name, my sister-in-law's name, not mine. There it was, black and white, filed years ago, quietly, legally. I felt dizzy. I sat down on a nearby chair and held the papers in my hands like they might disappear if I didn't. How did this happen? I asked, more to myself than to her. She shrugged gently. Looks like a transfer of ownership. Signed and notarized. Signed. My signature was there. Or something that looked like it. I left the building in a haze. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. I thought about confronting them right then. Driving straight to the house. Demanding answers. But something stopped me. They had already shown me who they were willing to be. Calm, prepared, confident. They had planned this, which meant I needed to slow down. That night, back at the motel, I called an old friend. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A lawyer. Not a property specialist, but close enough to listen. I didn't give details at first. I just asked if something like this was possible. He was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said. It happens more than you think. I told him everything then. The caregiving, the signatures, the lock. When I finished, he said, don't talk to them yet. That was the first time someone had told me what I needed to hear. Gather everything, he said. Every record, every message, every payment. I hung up and sat in silence. For the first time since being locked out, I felt something like control return. Just a little. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. I didn't confront them. That part surprised me the most. Every instinct I had told me to drive straight to the house and demand answers. To stand on the porch and knock until someone opened the door. To make noise. To be seen. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood something important. They weren't scared of noise. They were counting on it. So instead, I went quiet. I moved out of the motel after the second night and into my car again. I rotated parking spots so no one noticed me too long in one place. I showered at the gym. I folded my clothes carefully and kept them clean. I went to work every day and acted normal. Inside, I was anything but. Every evening after work, I sat somewhere alone with my laptop and kept digging. I went through years of bank statements, highlighted payments, cross-checked dates. I made lists. I organized everything into folders with clear names, like I was building a case instead of remembering a life. The pattern became impossible to ignore. I had paid for almost everything: mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, repairs. My brother's contributions were occasional, small, always framed as help, never as responsibility. And then there were the gaps, the quiet changes, the paperwork I didn't fully understand at the time. The way things shifted without discussion. It wasn't one big theft. It was a long, slow one. Meanwhile, they acted like nothing had happened. I saw pictures on social media. My sister-in-law smiling in the kitchen. My nephew in the backyard. I used to mow every weekend. A caption about feeling grateful for our home. That word burned every time. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I didn't react at all. They noticed. On the fourth day, my brother texted me, just checking in. Hope you're settling okay. Settling. Like I had moved cities by choice. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'm fine. I typed, thanks, nothing else. A few minutes later, another message came through. We need to talk about some logistics. When you have time. I knew what that meant. They wanted closure. On their terms. I didn't reply. The next day, my sister-in-law called. I let it ring. She called again an hour later. Then she left a voicemail. Her voice was calm, friendly, almost kind. We just want to make sure everything is clear, she said. We don't want any misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. That was when the pressure started. They didn't show up angry. They showed up reasonable. My brother ran into me outside my office building a few days later. He must have waited. Hey, he said, smiling like this was a coincidence. Can we talk? I said I was late for a meeting. He walked with me anyway. I know this is hard, he said. Change always is. But we're family. We don't need to make this into something bigger than it is. I stopped walking and turned to him. You locked me out, I said quietly. He held up his hands. Legally, it wasn't locking you out. That word again. Legally. Look, he said, lowering his voice. You lived there a long time. We appreciate everything you did. But it's time to move on. Move on. From my own house. You signed, he added. That matters. I searched his face for something. Guilt, doubt, anything. I didn't find it. I have a meeting, I said again. This time I meant it, he nodded. Let's talk soon. I walked away with my heart pounding so hard it hurt. They weren't afraid because they thought they were untouchable. They had papers. They had possession. They had confidence. And they thought I was alone. At night, when I lay in the back of my car staring at the ceiling, doubt crept in. Quiet and persistent. What if they were right? What if I had signed everything away without realizing it? What if the law didn't care about effort, or sacrifice, or intention? What if all I had left was anger and nowhere to put it? Those were the hardest moments. The ones where nothing distracted me. No work. No research. Just me and the weight of it all. But every morning, I woke up and kept going. I met with a property attorney recommended by my friend. I brought everything I had. Boxes of papers, printouts, notes. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and took a breath. They were careful, he said. I'll give them that. My heart sank, but he continued. Careful doesn't mean clean. He pointed to a document I barely remembered signing. This one, he said. Do you remember being told this would transfer ownership? I shook my head. No. Do you remember having independent legal counsel? No. Do you remember being told you could refuse? I swallowed. No. He nodded slowly. That matters, he said. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was something. He explained how pressure works. how timing matters, how grief can be considered, how patterns of payment can contradict ownership claims. It won't be quick, he warned. And it won't be easy. I didn't care about quick. I cared about right. While the legal process began, the emotional pressure increased. My brother started showing up more. At my workplace, at the gym, once, even at the grocery store, always calm, always reasonable. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said one evening in the parking lot. We could have handled this privately. You already handled it privately, I replied. Without me, he frowned. You're risking the family over this. That one hurt. I had given everything to that family. Years of my life, my comfort, my future, and now I was the problem. My sister-in-law sent messages late at night. We never meant to hurt you. We thought you'd understand. Why are you doing this to us? Each one was designed to make me feel small, ungrateful, difficult. I didn't respond. Instead, I kept records, screenshots, dates, times. Silence became my shield. Inside, though, the conflict was constant. I missed the house. I missed the routines. I missed the version of my life where family meant safety. There were moments I almost gave in. Moments where I thought about walking away just to make it stop. But then I remembered standing barefoot on cold tile. Remembered the click of the lock. And I stayed. Weeks passed. Then months. The case moved slowly. Letters were sent. Requests made. Tension thickened. My brother stopped smiling when he saw me. My sister-in-law stopped pretending. The power they thought they had began to shift. Just slightly. They felt it, and they didn't like it. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was thick, official, heavy in my hands in a way that had nothing to do with paper. I didn't open it right away. I sat in my car outside work and stared at the envelope. My name printed cleanly on the front. No mistakes. No confusion about who this was. For months, everything had felt slow and uncertain. Waiting, gathering, holding my breath. But this letter felt different. This felt like movement. I finally tore it open and read. Then, I read it again. And then I closed my eyes and let my head fall back against the seat. Because for the first time, since the night they locked me out, the truth wasn't just something I felt. It was something written down. The attorney had found discrepancies. Not small ones. Serious ones. Documents filed out of sequence. Signatures notarized under questionable circumstances. A transfer that didn't align with the financial record. Most importantly, a clear pattern showing that I had continued paying the mortgage and taxes long after. The supposed transfer of ownership, that wasn't normal. That wasn't clean. That wasn't legal. I laughed quietly in the car. Just once. Not because it was funny. Because the pressure I'd been carrying finally shifted, even just a little, that afternoon. My attorney called. They're nervous now, he said. I asked how he knew. They asked for an extension, he replied. People don't ask for more time when they're confident. The first real crack. After that, things escalated quickly. My brother called me that night. Not a text. Not a polite message. A call. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. On the third call, I answered. What do you want? I asked. There was no calm in his voice this time. No patience. What are you trying to do? He demanded. Do you know how serious this is? Yes, I said. I do. This could ruin us, he said. I was quiet for a moment. You already ruined me, I said. That's not fair, he snapped. We didn't force you to sign anything. You knew I was grieving, I replied. You knew I trusted you. Silence. Then he said, you should have paid more attention. That was it. That was the moment the last piece of doubt fell away. I'll let my lawyer handle this, I said, and hung up. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, documents, and waiting rooms that smelled like coffee and old paper. I told my attorney everything, every detail I remembered, even the small things I wasn't sure mattered. They mattered. The day of the hearing arrived quietly. No drama, no build-up, just a date on a calendar that I stared at every morning like it might move if I wasn't careful. I wore a simple jacket, clean shoes, nothing flashy. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to be seen as I was. My brother and sister-in-law were already there when I arrived, sitting together, whispering, avoiding my eyes. They looked smaller somehow, not physically, just less sure. When the proceedings began, I listened as their attorney spoke. He used careful language, polished phrases. He talked about agreements and intentions and legal rights. Then it was our turn. My attorney didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply laid everything out: the timeline, the payments, the inconsistencies, the lack of independent counsel, the context of grief and dependence. He presented the records I had spent months gathering, each one placed carefully on the table, like a quiet statement. This is what really happened. I watched the expressions change across the room: confusion, concern, interest. Then, the judge asked me to speak. I stood up slowly, my legs shook, but my voice didn't. I didn't talk about betrayal. I didn't talk about pain. I talked about facts. I talked about moving back into care for my mother, about paying bills, about being told documents were just formalities. I talked about trust. When I finished, I sat down and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The room was silent. The judge asked my brother a question. He hesitated. That hesitation mattered. After a short recess, the decision came. The transfer of ownership was suspended pending further review. The eviction was deemed improper. Temporary control of the property was returned to me until the case was resolved. It wasn't the final ruling, but it was enough. My sister-in-law cried quietly. My brother stared straight ahead. I didn't look at them. I walked out of the building and stood in the sunlight, letting it hit my face like I had just come up from underwater. That evening, I drove back to the house. I parked in the driveway for the first time in months. The key I had replaced turned smoothly in the lock. The door opened. The air inside smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. Some furniture was gone, some rooms rearranged, but the bones of the place were still there. My place. I walked through slowly, touching walls, standing in doorways, letting the quiet settle. I wasn't angry. I was tired. They moved out within the week. No arguments. No apologies, just boxes and silence. And for the first time in a long time, the house was quiet in a way that felt honest. The house felt bigger once I was alone in it again, not empty, just quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. The first night back, I didn't sleep in a bedroom. I slept on the couch, the same couch I had bought so long ago. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I just lay there and listened to the house settle. Pipes ticking, wind against the windows, familiar sounds that told me I was exactly where I was supposed to be. In the morning, light came through the kitchen window and landed on the counter the same way it always had. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary. And somehow, that felt like justice. The legal process continued, but it didn't control my days anymore. The worst part was over. The fear, the not knowing, the feeling that I had lost something I could never get back. What remained was quieter work, cleaning out rooms, returning furniture to where it made sense to me, putting photos back on the walls, though not all of them. Some memories were better kept in drawers. I found things they had left behind: a sweater, a cracked mug, a child's drawing folded into a book. I put them in a box and dropped it off without a note. That wasn't kindness. That was closure. People asked questions when they found out. Friends, co-workers, distant relatives who suddenly remembered my number. I didn't tell the whole story. I said there was a disagreement. I said it was resolved. I learned that not everyone deserves the full version of your pain. The final ruling came months later, quietly, in writing. The transfer was voided. The house was legally mine. No celebration. No victory speech. I sat at the kitchen table and read the letter once. Then I folded it and placed it in a drawer with the rest of the documents. I didn't need to look at it again. My brother didn't call after that. Neither did his wife. First, I wondered if I should reach out, if there was something to salvage. Then I remembered the lock clicking behind me, and I let the silence stay. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Bills still came. Work was still work. Some nights were lonely in ways that surprised me, but there was a difference now. I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. I started small, fixed a leaky faucet, repainted the spare room, planted something in the backyard where the grass had worn thin. Each task felt grounding, proof that I was building forward, not just recovering. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the sun go down. The same porch from the old photo, the one that had somehow survived all of it. I thought about how close I had come to walking away. How easy it would have been to disappear quietly and let them keep everything. No one would have blamed me, but I would have known. Justice didn't come from revenge. It came from staying, from paying attention, From asking hard questions when it would have been easier not to. I didn't buy their house, I reclaimed mine, and in doing so, I learned something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Being calm doesn't mean being weak. Being kind doesn't mean being blind. And walking away isn't always the strongest choice. Sometimes, the quietest justice is simply standing your ground.